example of what we're sort of trying to do with the linseeds. The cover crop that went in front of it, I don't know if the species got mentioned earlier, but we did a 6-way mix species. We've been playing around with different mixes and found that a mustard in the mix was creating lots of woody stems, which then when your actual crop was trying to grow, it was taking a lot for the bacteria to break down, and so it was really quite hard to sort of, it was staying for ages. There's a whole mat on the floor and it just wouldn't go away. So when we were speaking to Ian Gould at Oakbank, we were sort of talking about this, and he said, yeah, well, what are you trying to get out of it? I said, well, I want nice big biomass, decent rooting at all depths, and then I played around with rolling it. So I said, well, if I could roll it and kill the brassicas on a frost, he said, well, are you on a really fleshy, liquid-filled brassica, to when it gets killed on a frost, it then releases it quickly into the ground. Then if you've got anything else which is still growing, so you have multiple structures, what's then left still growing will then absorb all that moisture and all the nutrients that's been sucked up, and all the sugar that's available. It'll then grow up and then put another kick of biomass into the early spring. So this is what we did. So we've got a mix of Phacelia, vetch, oats, fodder rape and fodder radish. And there's something else in there off the top of my head I can't think about. No, there's something I can't remember. Or is it, yeah, it might have been a oat and something else, can't remember. Or there might have been 5, can't remember. But so this is the idea, that if we didn't have the sheep grazing it, we would have then rolled it, got rid of the brassicas, opened the top up, so then we'd be able to hit the target when we wanted to get rid of it with the black grass. But obviously the sheep came, did a great job. They blocked, grazed it all the way down the field and across the field, so they grazed it hard, and then once the vegetation was moved the sheep down the field. So there's a little bit of management. In a wet year we might have to look at that roll differently, but then I've always got that backup of the overwinter grass, that if it really was starting to say, oh, they're starting to pug it up quite a lot, we could say, look, just get them onto that grass and just do your worst on 70 acres of grass seed that you can go and have a crack at before you organise getting out of it. So so that's what we've done. The linseed is grown for United Oilseeds, and so we've done that for the last couple of years. And again, I still think it's quite a nice crop. But also the general public love it when it's all in blue and all the bees. Lots of people asking us questions. The general public asks us loads of questions about the cover crops. So yeah, when they're out, Phacelia was just coming onto bloom in certain places, and people are asking questions and what are you trying to do and all this sort of stuff. So it's a great entry into the public perception idea. So that's why it's another interesting role. And then the sheep were actually another bonus as well, so it was quite nice. Do you want to talk about the pond?
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to be able to use some really good capital funding in the HLS scheme to restore pretty much every pond on the farm. We got around a good lot of them, and the aim on every pond is to create great crested newt habitat. So what we want is clear water, open ponds with plenty of sunlight. So historically a lot of the ponds have got overgrown. Obviously they haven't got themselves overgrown. We're let them get overgrown. And the capital funding actually gave us the opportunity to go out and really do a real severe kind of haircut on every single pond. And then when we got rid of all the vegetation, we pump it out, take all the spoil out, and kind of leave ourselves with a really rather kind of unkind looking mud bowl. But if you kind of let nature, like we were talking about earlier, to build it and they will come, let nature take its course and manage it gently afterwards. You know, these ponds are all rainwater filled, clay based. You get that flush with the sunlight of the broadleaf aquatic vegetation, which is the vegetation that the great crested newts really want to lay their eggs on. So species like willow herb and water mint and watercress, which have got really quite big leaves. The female great crested newt lays the egg on the underneath of the egg and then folds the leaf over to make like an envelope, and that's where the egg then hatches out from there into a nymph into the water. So if we're getting that flush of vegetation, we've got our great crested newt habitat right, and if we have the habitat for great crested newts, dragonflies, all the other invertebrates, sort of aquatic invertebrates that we're looking at, will all kind of respond as well. And so getting up onto this kind of stage, this is probably at least 10 years after it was cleaned out, and now we're just looking at different ways. Some years we kind of hit the hedge quite hard on one side, other years we'll let it run. We'll mow around the edge one year. We're just trying to kind of tinkering each year to see what works, but just trying to keep clear water is the number one thing. This year you can pretty much see probably around the edge of the pond from where you see maybe how low the water level is compared to other years. And with these clay line ponds, hopefully we were able to dig them deep enough so that they never dry out. Where there's other places and other areas of the farm, there are ponds that dry out, but even in a year like this, we're trying to protect the great crested newt colony. This is the first pond that we found great crested newts on this farm, and from here they've spread round to a few other areas. The moat around the hall, which we've done a lot of work on this winter, the great crested newts have found their way over there almost instantly. As soon as we took the trees and the shelter out, and the water has just probably warmed up a little bit with more sunlight, great crested newts are going great guns in there as well. We surveyed all the ponds in 2009 as part of the Millennium Pond project, and it was identified then that there could be a great crested newt population here. So we're really pleased that population has actually started to increase. It might come back and bite us in the arse one day if we start putting planning applications in. But then there is people in the village who've had issues with great crested newts for planning. But I would say that we built a grain store, a big grain store over at the other farm. We did all our own great crested newt mitigation. And the planners took one look at it and just kind of said, yes, well done, and kind of let it ride. We didn't have to do anything else. So it's not a be all and end all. So these are the ponds also that I was talking about where Headley was surveying dragonflies earlier. Really good populations of dragonflies. I think we're up to 19 species of dragonfly. And then when he's doing that, we've also recorded like 22 species of butterfly around the farm, around the wildflower meadows. And a lot of these pondside areas, because they're getting mowed most years, we're getting a decent variety of species around the edge, so they're really good butterfly habitat as well. And just working all these habitats as hard as we possibly can. I talked a little bit earlier about yield of farmland wildlife. Just working hard at these habitats to get that yield and to get the maximum out of them all year on year is something that's really quite important.
It's just worth mentioning that fresh water on arable farms is really important for a whole range of wildlife. Turtle dove, which is one of our sadly most threatened species, probably about 4,000 breeding pairs down from over 100,000 in I don't know how many decades. It needs a good fresh source of water close to suitable nesting habitat, which there's plenty of on this farm, and obviously foraging habitat when they arrive here in the spring. Other farmland birds really benefit from fresh water, as do other wildlife. So the fact that Patrick and Brian have done this with great crested newts, because it ticked a box from Natural England's targeting perspective, we see fresh water pond restoration has been very important to a whole range of outcomes, and that's going to continue going forward in Elm really. So if you have a pond you can clean up in the future, recommend it, really do. It's hard work, isn't it? It's costly, but very rewarding, and there's money out there to pay for it.
Everyone likes a bit of destruction.
Yeah, definitely.
360 digger.
Yeah, it kept you busy over winter, didn't it?
Yeah, it was warm with that fire rate.
Yeah.
For 5 weeks down the hall.